Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, innovators, disruptors, and creators, and the leaders of our future. Welcome to Misk Talk. We are so excited to have you with us today. All of you will determine which direction this rapidly changing world is heading. It's your ideas, your achievements, your creativity, and of course your dreams that are going to shape the future for a better tomorrow. Misk is a philanthropic foundation set up by His Royal Highness Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. It seeks to develop young Saudis and really provide them with the opportunities to thrive and survive in a hyper-connected world. Misk promotes the disciplines of education, tech, science, arts, culture, and the creative digital media. It provides an avenue for all of you to really plug in to the global grid. So we are in California, home to Silicon Valley, technological center of the world, land of Steve Jobs, who once said, "I came, I saw, I conquered. I left, I came back. iMac, iPod, iTunes, iStore, iPhone, iOS, iPad, iCloud, I retire." And that's really the goal here, isn't it? Everyone that I've met today and every time I come to California, to Silicon Valley, has a startup plan. Everyone, right? And it's usually on average, I think, about 5 months. And it tends to go like this. Month 1, you establish a company. Month 2, raise seed funds. Month 3, raise the next level funds. Month 4, sell to other company. Month 5, buy an Audi car. I've seen so many in Silicon Valley. I've always wondered that must be it. But seriously though, it really is an amazing place to be. All of you know it. It is home to the largest number of millionaires. It's also, I notice, at least 10 degrees warmer than San Francisco at all times, and that if you want to buy a house, you will routinely be outbid by a 20-something-year-old. I should know. I'd like to introduce our guest speakers to you in just a moment. Our first speaker will join us with a very exciting, a very compelling talk. But first, a little bit more about Misk. Please watch.
هم الطاقة الحقيقية والقوة الحقيقية لتحقيق هذه الرؤية، وهي أهم ميزة بالنسبة لدى السعودية هي الطاقة الشبابية اللي فيها، والميزة الجيدة أنهم شباب واعي قوي لديه طموح رائع مثقف متعلم بشكل جيد مبدع لديه قيم عالية. باقي فقط نضع الرؤية ونعمل عليها.
Empowering young people leads to a stronger future. But how do we support young people so that they thrive in this rapidly changing world? How do we equip them with the knowledge and skills they need to create a modern, sustainable economy? Our foundation, Misk, was established by His Royal Highness Prince Mohammed bin Salman bin Abdulaziz in 2011 to discover, develop, and empower young people to overcome the challenges of today and contribute to the advancement of tomorrow. We focus on 4 areas. In education, we help young people move from learning to earning. In technology and science, we establish tech accelerators and incubators. In arts and culture, we showcase and promote the work of talented artists. In media, we support the creation of innovative content and inspire our audiences. We know that these opportunities have no boundaries and cannot be achieved alone. So, we collaborate with the world's leading organizations, universities, corporations, NGOs, and governments to provide new horizons for young people to thrive. In our first 6 years, through 100 events, programs, and initiatives, we have served over 1 million young people from more than 65 countries. This is just the start. We want you to join us on our journey as we work to invest in our greatest and most valuable asset, our young people.
Our first superstar speaker has spent 10 years bringing clean tech technologies and businesses to market. Ladies and gentlemen, please offer a very warm welcome to Besma Al-Jarbu, the Business Development Director at Qnovo, and her topic is Greening the Desert.
Hello, everyone, and good evening. It's a real treat to be here in front of you today and to be a part of Misk Talk. I'm honored to have this opportunity to share my story and to tell you how it ties in a bit with Saudi's vision for clean energy. My name is Besma Jarbu. I'm half Saudi, half American. My father's Saudi from Qasim. My mom is American from rural Missouri. So I'm a real hybrid of cultures. My less charitable friends say that I'm half Bedouin and half hillbilly. And that's my mom there with the slingshot and my father. But that's not quite true. We're not Bedouin and we're certainly not hillbilly. In fact, this is a much more accurate representation of my parents, who met in Missouri when they were both going to university in the 1970s. They married, and then they moved to Riyadh, where I was born. I spent the first half of my life until graduating high school in the Middle East. And although I spent my school years in the Middle East, I still spent my summers growing up on a farm in Missouri. And as a child, I was very outdoorsy. I developed a real passion for the environment. But what really brought home and really fired up that love for the environment and that passion was the first Gulf War. Many of you, it seems, might be too young to have lived through it. Who here lived in the Gulf during the war? A handful. You'll remember the iconic photos, right? Towards the end of the war, as the Iraqi forces were retreating, they set fire to the Kuwaiti oil wells. Even down in Riyadh, toxic clouds showered black rain down upon us. My younger brother developed severe asthma. I remember him wheezing and constantly reaching for that inhaler. The environment, it's such a lofty word, and yet we forget that we rely on the environment for just a basic and decent quality of life. I decided at age 10 that I was going to do something about it. I decided that if not, we were going to devolve into this post-apocalyptic world where we're all fighting over drops of water and oil. Kind of like this. You'll recognize Mad Max. I swear, I went to see this movie. It was like seeing my childhood nightmare up on the big screen. I had to walk out. I just couldn't sit through the whole movie. I decided at age 10 that when I grew up, I was going to work for Greenpeace. Even better, I was going to be their accountant. Now the Saudis in the audience understand that I must be from Qasim. Only a Qasimi child would think that they were going to revolutionize the world by more effective money management. I did. I went to school for accounting at the University of Virginia. And I did work a few years in it, but I decided that bean counting wasn't for me. So I went and I worked for a large internet media firm. But I returned to my mission when I had the good opportunity to join First Solar. So First Solar had just gone public and opened up their office in New York City. It was such an exciting company. They had a really unique breakthrough technology for solar panels. And they were run by a really savvy leadership. So even though we were a global leader in solar energy, it still felt like a young startup company. Now, at First Solar, I realized firsthand, I got to see firsthand how when you have business and technology and policy, and they're all working together in sync, you can make magic happen. The entire industry grew and thrived. And this is what happened in the last 10 years. Solar power prices have plummeted. So if you're today making a decision to build a new power plant, you better think long and hard why it's not going to be renewable. I worked in corporate development, and I got to work on the most amazing partnerships and acquisitions in the industry. But my side hustle was how to bring solar power to the Middle East. So I started to travel to the region regularly, bringing first solar resources and focusing on transferring knowledge to the Middle East. That's in Oman. We were successful. We won the first project at Masdar. We won the first project in Dubai, and we co-developed the largest project in Jordan. But my sights were always set on Saudi Arabia, not just because I'm from there, but because of its potential, right? Its vast natural resources, its financial strength, its human capital. Saudi Arabia can and should be a global leader in clean energy. And I remember going to a meeting at the conservative Saudi Electricity Authority. All electricity authorities are conservative. But in walked this stern-looking man, long beard, short thobe, and I immediately judged and said, well, he's not likely going to be open to accepting new technologies. And yet his eyes lit up in the meeting, and he spent the whole meeting evangelizing about why solar was vital for our country and for its future. We all had dreams of this clean industrial revolution. Enthusiasm was there, business was ready, technology was ready, but unfortunately at the time, policy just didn't pull together, and our dreams were put on hold. In 2012, I decided that it was time for me to move on to a new adventure. But before I left, I made sure that a tie remained, and we brought on board at First Solar a young, promising Saudi engineer, who I'll tell you a little bit about shortly. I then went on to finish my graduate degree at MIT, where amazing technologists are working at making the world a better place. I then followed that up with a degree at the Harvard Kennedy School, where I got to deep dive into policy making. After 2 freezing winters in Boston, I moved out here, and I worked for a startup that was developing advanced software for lithium-ion batteries. And my job was to bring that technology to hot new markets like electric vehicles and energy storage. But let's go back to Saudi Arabia. Saudi 2012 versus Saudi today. To say that they're different is a complete understatement. Change is afoot. Today, the Saudi government is in hyperdrive. I mean, last week it's even in hyperloop. But Saudi Arabia, as part of the Vision 2030, has laid out a plan for clean energy. In 5 years, we're going to reach 10%, from zero today, 10% of our power from renewable energy. And in February, the first power plant was awarded to Aqua Power. I'm so excited about all this news. I want us to blow past that 10%. I want us to get to 30. I want us to get to 50%. 50% by 2030. We can do it. Not just because it's good for our health, not just because it makes financial sense, but really because in order for Saudi Arabia to be a true leader in clean energy, then it needs to lead. And that means tackling the difficult challenges head on. How do you integrate large amounts of renewable energy onto your grid? How do you store energy from the midday sun to the evening when everybody returns home and turns on their air conditioners? How do you connect a smart house to a smart autonomous vehicle to a smart grid? Here in the Bay Area, these are the challenges that we're tackling right now, the innovators, the businesses, and the policymakers. And there's no reason why Saudi Arabia shouldn't be head-on involved in partnering with them and in leading and figuring out these solutions. I'm up here today because I truly believe that Saudi Arabia can and should be a global leader in clean energy. And one way to go about that is through education and training. So let's go back to that Saudi engineer at First Solar. We sent her during the middle of the winter to New Jersey, where she learned how to design solar systems. We then sent her in the middle of the summer to cold San Francisco, where she learned how to develop power plants. We then felt sorry for her and decided to give her a little bit of taste to home, and we sent her to Arizona, where she got to work on advanced technologies. And even working at First Solar, she even learned how to drive. And I imagine that this summer, she may even be driving herself to work in Riyadh, where she works at the Ministry of Energy, and she works every day at bringing the kingdom's clean energy vision to reality. As for me, I'm going to be moving on to my next adventure. I'm joining a large technology firm to lead their global clean energy efforts. And I promise that I will work every day to make our world and our children's world clean and bright. Thank you.
Well, thank goodness you gave up accounting. We're all better off for it. Thank you, Basma. Our next speaker has been an entrepreneur since he was 18 years old. He's focused on smart learning solutions in AI, edutainment, and gamification. And just a few minutes ago, he told me to ask the audience here, and the students in particular, if you can imagine yourselves, if you're a normal student and you're sitting there at the end of class and you are begging for another assignment. He's going to tell you how and why it would be that you would do that. I'd like to introduce Mohammed Al-Madani, the chairman and CEO of Classera Inc., to speak about the future of smart learning in the Middle East.
Okay, thank you, Zain. And hello, everyone. I would like to start by thanking Misk for the invitation to speak today and to meet this wonderful audience. So, the future of smart learning in the Middle East seems like a big, subject. But we're going to try, to talk about it and, go to some history, and from the history go all the way to the future and see and discover some facts that might surprise you actually today. Okay, so going to the history, of the education in the Middle East, if you just go 50 years back, you're going to see that, the literacy rate was, below 50%, and by the time we got, to 2012, in the Gulf region especially, it went above 90%. In the year 2002, we reach an equality, of education for male and female in the area. Many people, doesn't know that. So the region is moving, very rapidly. I think the clicker is a little slow here. So a study, an interesting study shows that, unlike global trends, some surprising facts in the Middle East, grad students from 4 and 8 grades, female, outperform male students in those grades. Sorry, gentlemen. I mean, that's one of the studies that is conducted on the Middle East. Even when you go to government, government allocate an average of 5.3% into education compared to 3% 20 years ago. And Gulf governments especially, dedicate around 20% of their annual budget to education. In the area of e-learning, now e-learning became, a necessity more than a luxury. We want, the students of today is very different from the students, 30 years ago or 20 years ago. Maybe when we were students, and some, of my friends here in the audience, how many friends do you remember you had in that time? Someone who's social might have, 20, 15 students. Now you ask any student at school, how many students you have? You say, well, I have 343 in Facebook, and I have 500 in Twitter, and you please give me what's exactly your question. So it's a very different environment, and we are changing, and luckily the region is changing too, and there is a market size of $506 million in just last year alone, which is an increase of 8.2% even though the internet access in the Middle East still, in the school, for the schools, is about 5% or less. But, many people would say, are you checking your Facebook, or you're thinking about this bad images, when it comes to technology education, even though actually it is very necessary. The region is changing, dramatically. Some, people in the audience might, think about the Middle East as a place of conflict or place of wars. How come it's going to have a good future when it comes to smart learning, not just learning? Actually, there is a very, different dynamic in the region, and some of you, of course, know that. The region always has been planning like 5-year plan, 3-year plan. For the first time, they're planning like ahead, like 15 years, like what the Vision 2030 have done in Saudi Arabia. It's not just Saudi, many other states has followed, like you have seen here in Egypt and Dubai and Kuwait, doing this long-term planning instead of this 5-year plan, which is impacting everything. When it comes to education, these are some programs that you might not know. Each of those ministries start to have a digital transformation project within the country itself. So the Future Gate in Saudi Arabia, for example, to transform all the public schools. The same one here, Prince Mohammed bin Rashid in Emirat, and the same in Bahrain. And these are just few examples of how the region is moving very quickly. And believe it or not, these pictures are not, from someplace in Europe. These are, Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and believe it or not, Iraq. Of course, I'm not claiming all the schools look like this, but this is how, the dynamic is changing in education, utilizing technology in education to the level where we speak in the same language that the same, young generation is talking about today. But let me take you a little bit, backwards. So why I'm talking about this subject and how I'm interested, in about education and e-learning and edutainment. So let me take you to a small brief about myself. So that was my first company that I created when I was 18, as I was saying. So I was in King Fahd University. I went there for just a year before I came to the States. And I created my first company. It was in the technology and 3D animation in general. And we started, in the lines, if you knows where is that in KFUPM, it's a very hard start. I grabbed some students and said, let's start a company. It was crazy. My father was trying to fight me. He's a professor in university. He say, you don't want to lose your job. Don't tell me about this drop-up things. I said, don't worry. I'm not going to drop out. I'm going to continue my college and continue my business as well. So even though we were 18, in less than 2 years, we were working with some big companies. I went to the U.S. and we started working with P&G, Sabic, Aramco, STC, some in the U.S., some here, some in Saudi. We were doing hundreds of thousands at the college life. But toward the end of my college life, I said, I want to do something more meaningful. I want to do something that impacts students and education. Here comes the idea of Classera. So in 2012, we say, how about, we redefine the whole experience. Not just using normal technology, which we are used to in universities here. We want to do something more engaging, more fun. And that was, the start. It was a crazy idea. And we had just 3 elements, how we want to renovate the space. We said, how can we make it inspiring with the social engagement and artificial intelligence? So one thing we have done, we have a program within the platform called Smart Mate. So nowadays, students, actually, there is his smart mate start talking to him. Hey, Ahmed, I think you're not, good integration by part. Let me introduce you to some concepts. Let me give you some content. Let me polish you. As you can ask him 5 in the morning, you can ask him 3 in the morning, and the system will respond to you. A persona will understand the personality of the student and give him what he needs based on his personality. And in the social learning, there is some massive competition between all the schools in the region. Not just you're competing with your peers in the same classroom. You're competing across the countries and differently in other places. In the inspirational element, of course, we're giving you some examples. One example we're doing in the gamification and edutainment is then ask you, is it possible for a student, I want to ask everyone in the audience, to go and be, and beg for another homework? Like a normal student at the end of the class, is it possible to beg for the homework, or is it more of a fantasy? Let me know. What do you think? Is it a fantasy or a reality nowadays? So, one of the things we have done, So everyone in the system who does anything in the assignment, he starts getting some score, like his mileage. By the end of the semester, we classify them to green, silver, diamond, and we get to see the top in the city, in the class, and in the country. Not only that, we link them with the private sector. So they have a card. They go to some of the top restaurants, top theme parks, top, the leader in each industry. So if a student go to one of the theme parks that we have, you're going to present the card. Even if he's a green, he's going to get 20% discount. If he gets silver, he gets 50% discount. If he's diamond, he gets admitted for free. So that's one way, you go to the same when he goes to other, places like Thobes, like, car, dealers. So imagine, is it possible for a student to go and beg the teacher, please give me another homework idea. I have that many points to be a gold student. It might be a different story, right? So, by the way, with these big ideas, do you think that was, very successful to go and just sell, whatever we want to sell to the market? It was really, really hard. Very big rejection. We used to go to schools. If we started in the US, and then we focused in the Middle East as well. So we work in both markets at the same time. We started in, Texas area, then we moved, to Silicon Valley. It was very big rejection. Many students, many schools would say, give it for us for free, and we might try it. We might do it. And these kind of stories. But did we give up there? Just looking back now, 5 years later, we have more than 2 million users. Actually, we moved just not just in Silicon Valley alone. In the Middle East, we're in more than 8 countries, not just in Saudi. So our offices in Saudi, Dubai, and we went to other countries where we give franchises to our products. Big corporations like Microsoft and Intel are proud to be under Classera booths in the international exhibitions. And we went to like 3 million page view per day interaction of 1 million educational minutes. People are interacting, in a very big way. Of course, I'm trying to summarize a big story into a very small, talk. We went all the way where we became in the top 100 most visited website in Saudi Arabia and in the Gulf, in the most 15,000 in the world. Get so many international awards, like the Learning Award and the BIT Award, which is like the Oscar of the field, and all the way to getting some international awards as well in the region. Endeavor is one of the organizations that classified the most high impact entrepreneurs in the world, and they classify us in that direction. So let's take just finally, I want to conclude with the case study of Saudi Arabia. So in Saudi alone, we went to serve more than 80% of the country, all the gifted and talented students. We did an interesting project with the border of Yemen. So when the war broke, we did the biggest virtual academy in Yemen, and the border of Yemen, and students start getting access to education material and full school from their homes. And it was featured in BIT London, which is the biggest conference there. We have the virtual academy in UK, and which is some news that might impact you here in the US very soon. We're working with all the the students in scholarship to teach their kids the lessons that they cannot get here in America. So we did a virtual academy to enrich them, and we start with the UK, and now we're going to go next year to the US and other countries. We're working with even blind students and some disabilities. The final project is the Future Gate project. Going to impact many audience, I guess, here, Saudis, so it's going to impact you all. A Future Gate project, we went to like 3 ministers before to try to talk to them. I'm trying to give this story to say how it is difficult then. If you keep going, it is never impossible. So we went to 3 ministers. They all said, this is a wonderful idea, but they never responded. Until finally, when we met Prince Mohammed here in San Francisco, he introduced to the current minister. And after 6 months of workshop, we come up with the Future Gate project, which is the ambitious project to cover the entire kingdom by 2020. All the public schools in the country are going to use, smart learning. I think some of you are in the audience used to Daftar Abu Sittin, so that's not going to be the case anymore after 2020. Some of you used to Abu Arba'in, so that he can tell the teacher, I ran out of papers, I cannot do it anymore. So all of that will change in the future, and we have some PhD research to back what we have done. going back to the future of smart in the Middle East, there's going to be a lot of gamification, artificial intelligence, and virtual reality and augmented reality in our education. That's what you're going to see. In fact, I'm very optimistic that some countries in the Middle East, Saudi, one of them, going to be a benchmark and an example, a global example to the rest of the world in the area of smart learning. And we might see the Middle East again, a global knowledge center. A final, funny story, or let's say an inspirational part, going back to the personal story. I want to show you the first headquarters of Classera where all that have started. You can see this coming picture. What do you think is that? Does any of you know KFUPM? That was the very first headquarters of our work. We used to work there and with big enthusiasm. In less than 7 years, going, let's see, this is the final slide. Please come. It wouldn't come. It wants me to be here. So if you can help me in the back. In less than 7 years, these are the main offices of Classera right now. In the most prestigious offices in the, in the US, and in the region. You can, come to our office in Jeddah. We have like big, parts where we have, gamification and open spaces and places for work, places for play, and in less than 7 years. If we can do it, if I can do it, any of you can do it. It didn't come easy. That was a little, a 10-minute talk to summarize a big story that I've experienced over the last, 7 years or more. But if with determination, you always can do it. Just put, any dream big. Put the big dream and try to go after it. And, if you keep doing that, one day you're going to reach to your dream one step at a time. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mohammed, for dreaming big for all of us and bringing Classera to the world. Our next speaker says that he likes to watch world news, he listens to podcasts, he loves to read, and also he likes to tell us how robots are going to replace us in some very unexpected ways. He's going to tell you about someone called Emily in his talk, which is actually very surprising. I'd like you to give a warm welcome to Abdulaziz Al-Faris at University of California at Berkeley. He's going to be talking about automation and the future of work.
Good evening. As Zain said, I will be talking about automation and how it will change the future of our work. But before that, let me start with a quick introduction about myself. I was born and raised in Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia. And when I graduated high school, I made the decision to move to the US to continue my education. Now, when I chose University of Washington up in Seattle, a lot of people has asked me, why would you move from Riyadh to Seattle, a rainy city, rather than moving to Arizona or Nevada, who have like similar weather to Riyadh? Well, I told them, I lived for 18 years in Riyadh. I enjoyed the sun enough. Now it's time for some rain. I wouldn't mind it. I would actually enjoy it. Well, let me tell you, 5 years from that, rain is not as appreciable as it used to be. I'd leave it at that. So after graduating from University of Washington, I moved to the Bay Area, specifically Berkeley, to continue my master's in mechanical engineering as well, specializing in control system design. So us as control engineers, what we do is we automate systems and processes so that they can work by themselves without any interference with humans. But let's start with a quick history of automation. According to the US Department of Agriculture, in the early 1800s, about 90% of the workforce in the United States were working in farms. But today, that figure dropped to less than 2%. Yet, we have food more abundant than ever. The reason for that is because we reached such a high level of autonomy in farms that humans are not necessary anymore. We can make food without any farmer. But how about current and future and near future automation? Well, probably when I say the word automation, the first thing that comes into mind is this picture over here, a network of robots working on factories and creating stuff. But actually, there are a lot of kinds of automations, including self-driving vehicles. And notice that I said vehicles, not cars, because cars are only one kind of vehicles. But you can think of planes, trains, they're all some kind of automation. And those will clearly replace the blue-collar jobs. But are the blue-collar jobs the only kind of jobs that are being replaced by automation? Well, actually, white-collar jobs are being replaced as well. So, as you can see, automated trading systems, or what they call high-frequency algorithmic trading, is taken over in Wall Street. According to Morgan Stanley, more than 84% of stocks traded today are being traded by computers, replacing a lot of humans in Wall Street, and those are considered blue-collar jobs. This is just one form of AI and one form of advancement in AI. But actually, in this picture over here is Garry Kasparov, the world chess champion in the 1990s. He was playing against Deep Blue, the IBM Super Chess computer, and Deep Blue became the first computer ever to win over a world chess champion. And ever since then, the field of chess computers has been developing in an incredible pace, to the point today where we have tournament only for chess computers, where humans are not allowed because they're just too boring for the computers. And that's surprising. But how about creativity? What makes us as humans unique? Music, writing, drawing, all of those kind of things. But even if that was the case, you would never have a sustainable economy where only artistic jobs are in place, because those jobs are popular by their nature, and only a tiny bit of the society will be making a living off of them. Listen to the music being played in the background. Do you think Bach or maybe Mozart composed it? Actually, it was composed by Emily Howling, a computer which has been composing music ever since the 1990s. Heliograph is Washington Post's AI, and it has been writing a lot of articles. It's not a human, it's a computer. And in 2016 alone, it wrote more than 800 articles covering the Olympics. So if you're someone who's keeping up with the news, you probably went over some of those articles and you never even knew about it. And this picture over here is being created by a computer. It's a Microsoft bot that translates whatever text you give him into some images. And it's not just looking for images, it's actually creating them. So this bird over here might not even be real. But what about the challenges that are facing automation? Well, we can start with regulations. Us, as a society, we tend to fear automation for safety reasons, and we don't fully trust it, and that's understandable for now. Unions will stand in the way of automation. If I told you that after 40 years of experience and education, all of those worth nothing now and you can't be employed, would you be okay with that? I wouldn't. I wouldn't go down without a fight, and that's what the unions are doing, which is just natural, because this will cause a huge issue of unemployability. For someone to be unemployable is for them to possess a set of skills that are not suitable for the market anymore. But you know, all of these things will just cripple automation, because no matter how hard we try to prevent it, it offers a significant economic advantage that results in its inevitable winning. And for that reason, we need to continue working on automation up to the point, even though those regulations are in place. We need a place where those regulations don't have any effect. Well, we can think about NEOM to be a window to our future. Well, for those who don't know what NEOM is, it's a future city that is being designed and built in Saudi Arabia. According to its vision, it will be a place where we live in the future while we create the future. In NEOM, we can prioritize development of automation and a lot of different things over anything else. And it can be what the world will be 30 years from now. Everyone will look at NEOM and they will see where they will be after they get rid of regulations and all. So let's explore some of its potential. Actually, it can provide a suitable tech infrastructure. By that, what I mean is, for example, in the autonomous vehicles industry, the biggest challenge that they're facing is basically the human drivers, because they're unpredictable. If you have a road that is full of autonomous vehicles, they will perform fantastically, even flawlessly. But now the human drivers are crippling that. And of course, in our world, we would never have, or at least like in the near future, we would never have roads that are fully automated. Everyone will still drive a car by that time. But in NEOM, we can create autonomous vehicle zones only, where we can develop and implement the next generation of autonomous vehicles. Advanced manufacturing is also one of NEOM's foundation. Using full factory automation, we can build new methods and new material that we have never built before and export it to the rest of the world. which will make NEOM an aspirational society where humans are exploring new fields that they will explore once automation takes over. So in conclusion, automation comes in different kinds, shapes, and more importantly, functionality. Now, the purpose of this presentation is not to convince you whether automation is good or bad, but just to let you know that it's inevitable. And we as humans should start seriously thinking of what we're going to do once automation takes over. Thank you all for listening.
طبعا أنا اليوم كنت جاية أتكلم عن تجربتي الخاصة جدا مع MIT وكيف إن إحنا نقدر إن إحنا نستخدم التقنية الجديدة أو أحدث التقنية في مجال الارتفيشال انتليجنس أو اللي هي الذكاء الاصطناعي في تطوير نظام الصحة عندنا، بحيث إن إحنا نبني مجتمع يكون صحي وقادر على إنه يلبي احتياجات الطب.
أول ما طلعت فوق المنصة كنت شوي حسيت في خوف، لكن تفاعل الجمهور خلاني أحس إني أنا من بين أصحاب.
And continue enhancing this beautiful world you are already building. Let us follow up and continue building this creative economy and doing things that have never been done on this planet. From Riyadh to Jeddah, and yes, to NEOM.
أشارك تجربتي مع العالم وأشارك تجربتي مع المجتمع السعودي بأن حنا قادرين في شتى المجالات أننا ننافس ونبرز طاقاتنا وجهودنا.
When I look at Saudi Arabia, I see potential. Potential for a country with over half its population under the age of 25. Potential for the youth who are looking to grow, learn, and change the world.
A result of the passion of one man, Mohammed bin Salman. His passion has transformed Saudi Arabia. A man of my age, I never thought it would happen in my lifetime. He's a passionate man. And if that man can change a country, imagine what your own passion can make for you. Thank you so much.
Our next speaker has range, and I mean really has tremendous range. She's debunking and challenging the ways we think about arts and science and essentially how we learn. This is a woman who has done research on leukemia and has won a major award for it. She worked under the Carter Center to assist in the Ebola crisis. She loves music and arts and nature, and she's debunking the very core of the thinking that was written many, many years ago when it came to arts and sciences. It was an author that my father taught me about called C.P. Snow. And C.P. Snow wrote this book called Corridors of Power. And in that book, he said that anyone who has learned the arts can never really learn science, can never really learn medicine, because the brain just doesn't get wired that way. However, someone who has learned science or done medicine can always pick up the arts, because anybody can do that. And I thought that when I listened to her speak today, that she really challenged the notions of how we learn, or how we see ourselves, either arts or science. So I'd love to introduce to you now Hajar Al-Zerma, who's a graduate of Stanford University, and I really want you to listen to her talking about how the interactions of arts and science really breed innovation.
Hi, I'm really excited to be here and to share with you a little bit of my journey and why it is I believe that the intersection of art and science breeds innovation. So I went to a liberal arts college for my undergrad, and when I stepped foot on campus, I was taken aback by the opportunity to take classes in every discipline. It was my attempt at answering the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? a question that I could never bring myself to answer. So, given the opportunity, I took a class in literally almost every subject. Everything from neuroscience to Native American literature to theater and to organic chemistry and everything in between. I eventually narrowed it down and majored in biology and economics. And all along, I kept a teeny tiny toe dipped in the arts as a vocalist and lover of music. So, in 2015, when I graduated, I knew that I had a lot of passions and I didn't know what to do with them. I was scared. I was like, I'll never be an expert in anything. So when my friends went on to begin their careers in tech and finance and go to medical school, I decided to do something a little different. I decided to take a year off and wander. Now, lucky for me, my parents lived in Vienna, Austria at the time, right in the heart of Europe, and right at the center of European art and culture. So it was a really easy decision. I decided to take a year off, move in with them, and use Vienna as my base to travel and explore parts of myself that I've never explored before. And that teeny tiny toe I kept dipped in the arts turned into a full-fledged immersion as I took classes in music and singing and songwriting and spent a lot of my time in museums and learning about art history. I really became engrossed in the art of nature and just the art of living. And in my newfound appreciation and in my newfound love of art, I began to think about intersectionality. In all of my economics classes, I always was taught that specialization led to productivity. And as a result of the culture I grew up in, I always thought that a person should be well-versed in one and only one discipline, that you need to choose between your right brain or your left brain. And then في السعودية, you have to choose between علمي or أدبي. That professionals existed in isolated units, scientists embarking on scientific endeavors with other scientists, artists with other artists. But you see, innovation happens at the intersection. Over the past few decades, we've experienced the death of the Renaissance man. This is why kids are asked at a very young age, what do you want to be when you grow up? This is why they're put into little boxes and told to follow only one true passion. But if you think back to the Renaissance era, or if you think back even further to the golden age of Islam, people embodied intersectionality. That's why greats like Khwarizmi and Ibn al-Haytham were able to exist as artists and scientists, as philosophers and mathematicians, as poets and astronomers. This is why they could contribute greatly to different fields all at once. Physicians of the time were called artists of healing, and they spent a lot of their time writing volumes of philosophies and poetry and drawings about how beautiful the human body is. See, the problem I see is that we oftentimes fail to recognize the beauty and creative elements in science. And also, we fail to recognize the rigor and calculated nature of art. Now, there was a study conducted in England, and it showed that despite the abstract nature of art, or despite the abstract nature of math and science, mathematical and scientific activity actually stimulated the same parts of your brain that were activated by beauty perceived through our senses. That means that when you're knee-deep in scientific research or solving a hard math equation, you're actually activating the same parts of your brain activated when you're listening to a moving piece of music or looking at a beautiful painting. There's a professor named Dr. Eagleman, and he is a neuroscientist at Stanford. And he is an advocate for this intersectionality. And he says that if we want innovation to excel, and if we want it to happen at a faster rate, we need to put artists at integral parts of the research and development process. And entities understand this. This is why MIT has its Media Lab for intersectional and interdisciplinary research. This is why companies like IBM and Xerox regularly host resident artists to be part of the R&D process. Because when scientists and artists collaborate, magic happens. Ideas are shared, and even when misunderstandings occur, they're able to ask questions through new perspectives that otherwise go unexplored. Now, what does this mean for a flourishing Saudi? Saudi Arabia already is excelling in both the sciences and the arts. Our country is becoming a powerhouse for scientific research. Our contributions to research published in high-impact journals has risen from number 39 to number 31 in the last 4 years alone. And the arts are growing even faster. Saudi has such a flourishing art scene. It's filled with young, talented artists eager to express themselves through music, through creative writing, through art. And I know because I literally stalk all of them on Instagram. Now, what I'm proposing now is that to tap into that potential, to create the spaces needed for them to collaborate. Because we need to stop looking at artists as just creators of beautiful things and start looking at them as creators of alternate perspectives that can really catalyze and spark innovation and create that change. There's so much to be said about the way art inspires science. Art is the ultimate motivating factor. So I've talked a lot about the collaboration of artists and scientists, but I think there's much to be said about cultivating your own inner artist. How many of us have a little inner artist that we want to explore further? Yeah, a lot of hands went up. Yeah, I can relate. I literally have the ultimate concerts in my shower, so I spend a lot of time. But it's important. It's really important. Science shows that engaging in artistic activities secretes dopamine in the brain that's associated to motivation and learning. That means when you take the time to draw or to sing or do a little dance, you're actually secreting signals in your brain that are just as essential to day-to-day functionings as exercise or going outside. Art is also a universal language. There's much to be said about the ultimate connection is a connection that surpasses spoken word. And that's something that art can do that nothing else can do, connect people. And science depends on these two things. Science depends on motivation because it's not the smartest scientists that are the greatest scientists. It's the most hardworking scientists, the one that never leave the lab, that really create innovation. And science depends on communication. That's why it's advancing so much in the age of internet and information sharing. But I think what scientists fail to do, or scientists sometimes struggle to do, is articulate or show the beauty of their work to a broad audience. They sometimes get so wrapped up in the convoluted nature of the question they're trying to answer that when they do find answers, only 5 people read what they're saying. Because we fail to communicate how beautiful what they're saying is. So what I propose is a marriage of these two things. A place and a space where artists and scientists can meet and share ideas and bring about this advancement. Now, intersectionality, innovation, advancement, it matters mostly, in my opinion, in the area of environmental engineering. I think Besma did a wonderful job of articulating the revolution in the energy sector. And there's much to be said about the urgency for Saudi Arabia to adapt to the changes. And like Besma, I also believe that Saudi can be a leader in the clean energy sector because it has the resources. And I'm not just talking about financial resources, I mean people, untapped potential, human capital in the form of young people, women, artists, scientists that just need the space for them to come together and share these ideas. There is a clean energy revolution happening, and what I want to do today is not tell you about it, because if you're a talk in San Francisco, at least 5 people are going to tell you about it. What I want to do today is invite you to be part of that revolution, regardless of your background and regardless of your field of study. Because science is too important to be left to scientists. So I challenge you today to collaborate. And I challenge you to invest in the spaces that breed collaboration and breed innovation. And most importantly, I challenge you to cultivate the parts of yourself that aren't traditionally associated with your field of study. So, if you're a scientist, explore your inner artist. And if you're an artist, explore your inner scientist. Bring back the Renaissance man, because innovation, it depends on it. Thank you.
And whether you're an artist or a scientist, you can still have concerts in the shower. Our next topic is actually a serious one that strikes close to my heart and is also actually one of the priorities for the new Director General of the World Health Organization, mental health and emotional well-being. So many times we surround ourselves with the individuals around us, with family, and everyone looks okay, and you don't really know what people are going through. Maybe they're suffering from depression. Maybe they're having suicidal thoughts. Maybe they need the support that they're not getting and we're not asking. And perhaps they're too afraid for stigma or just fear to say anything. And I think it's really fantastic that we want to address this issue here today. So it's really my pleasure to announce the next speaker who will be talking about the emotional wellness space, Mohammed Al-Qadi, the founder and CEO of Sibley, and he'll be speaking about my mental health journey.
Hello, everyone. I want to say that I'm cheating, so I have my phone here. I didn't get time to actually write my notes. So, assalamu alaikum. My name is Mohammed Al-Qadi. I'm 25-year-old, and I live here in San Francisco. I moved here 3 years ago to start my company. Today, I'd love to share with you sort of my mental health story and the personal lessons that I apply in my own life. Those lessons might apply to you and it might not. But if you have any new lessons for me, or if you want to correct a lesson that I've learned, then feel free to do so. In fact, I would love to invite you today, if you guys have the time tonight, to the place that most Saudis go to whenever we go to a new city, which is a shisha place. It's at 724 Geary Street. It has a close place to my heart and Omar's heart, who's basically, it's our first office. And so, although I might not have internalized this until recently, but one of the first lessons that we learn in Saudi is basically the importance of family. And so, as you can see here, I had an uncanny sense of fashion since I was little. Thanks to my mom, who's watching live. I love you, Mom. The first thing she said when I told her I'm giving this talk is, "What are you going to wear?" And so, as Saudis, we learn the importance of family, and we learn to look at the world through the lenses of siblings. حب لأخيك ما تحب لنفسك. We wish to each other what we wish to our own siblings. We also just see the good in people, whatever, however challenging that might be. We think that if intentions are right, then perception will follow. And إنما الأعمال بالنيات وإنما لكل امرئ ما نوى. And so, as you might expect from any Saudi, I would love to brag a little about my own family. And so, this is only half of my family. I drew them here just a couple days ago. I hope you see this, Mom, because I miss you. But in reality, I was fortunate enough to have a really beautiful family that really raised us on strong values that are very familiar to the Saudi people, that I think we generally underestimate as a society. And I think only further developments will show the importance of those familial compassion. Being one of 8 children meant that I really had anyone to talk to. I can always find some of my brothers or sisters to talk to at any time I needed, which was important. I would wrestle with my brothers, then wrestle for 1 minute and then process our emotions the minute after. I would just stare at my sisters, 2 elder sisters, Asma and Lamia, who really just showed me how ambitious a person could be throughout the struggles or hurdles that society might place on them. Our dad and mom did a fantastic job raising us. My dad, actually worked multiple jobs to provide for our education, and then I don't know how, but he managed to find the time to actually cuddle with us at night and sing for us. So thank you, Dad, for that. He also brought the personal computer to our house when I was at a young age, which allowed me to publish my first website at the age of 13. And then my mother, who, no matter how hard I tried, I could never see the depth of her compassion. She loved us endlessly and always showed that through the different areas of her life, including her work in charity and helping other families in need. So I lived a happy childhood. Everything was great. You know, I was just surrounded by love and compassion until high school came about, where I started to come out to the outside world and interact with people, and then suddenly get some of my ideas or thoughts rejected, which, you know, happens naturally in any society. It was personally hard for me. And so at a certain point in time, I started to stop actually sharing. And I started to, you know, isolate myself and did the familiar mistake that, you know, a lot of us do, which is just, you know, not talk about them and try to process them alone. Things started to add up. When I started to do that, it's just like negative feelings and negative thoughts over negative thoughts, and I started to isolate myself even further. At one point in college, I really started to feel like it's taking over my emotions. I started to have long cycles of depression and anxiety that I didn't have before. And I felt like I was disconnected from the world, including my own family. Luckily, I kept myself busy, which, you know, to stop my thoughts from spiraling, because at some point, I was afraid of actually sitting alone with my own thoughts. And so to stop that from happening, I started to do work. I started to go study. I started to do things that I usually enjoy. And one of the things, you know, even though it was hard to do, one of the classes that I liked in college was a class by Mustafa Ahmed, who's one of my favorite teachers. He actually thought I was never too young to actually to accomplish anything I wanted. And so in his class, I started to sketch the idea behind my first company, Feel It, which was an app to help people deal with their feelings, because I wanted that for myself. My phone stopped working for a second. So I got joined by two remarkable Saudis, Bara Hakami and Omar Leisa, who's here in the audience. Yeah. And, you know, we started our startup journey, and for the first time in a while, I started feeling happy. I started to actually feel motivated that I'm doing something that I like. And, you know, we launched our app, and then I started to realize that the learning curve that I'm just getting from being involved in the startup started to outpace my education in college. And so for me, I made the decision to drop out of college, which shocked like all my friends and family. But I understood that. I knew that, you know, it's impossible for anyone to know me better than I know myself. And so I made that leap, and luckily Feel It started growing. We started to have thousands of users in Saudi. We got an investment from a remarkable firm here called Bootstrap Labs. Ben and Nikolai, they found us in Dubai, and joined by Luigi, they invested in Feel It. And so we came to the US. We traveled halfway across the world, and started to try to implement our ideas behind Feel It, you know, to the world. And to our surprise, people didn't actually, you know, take it as, you know, as Saudis did. You know, people just thought that this is a silly idea. And in fact, I was pitching a lot of the times with no one actually listening. So thank you for listening. And so, you know, it's at some point, Feel It started to fail. We didn't get the number of users we wanted. We didn't get, you know, the amount of traction that was needed to sustain a company. And that was one of the most difficult times of my life. We were, you know, it was the only thing that gave me hope and happiness at the time. It was my sense of purpose. And to see it fail was a really hard thing. And it felt like the market, the tech industry has come to a conclusion like that building technology was more important than building people. And that was the only thing that was giving me a sense of purpose. And when it failed, I really felt like an imposter, that I was like lying to everyone, that I lied to everyone and fooled everyone, including myself. So, as if all of my long life fears came true, I started to separate myself from everyone again. And I felt like no one could possibly love me if I couldn't even love myself. And so I started to actually, contemplate suicide. I started to think, what could possibly be better than death at this moment? And so I asked myself, what could possibly be better than death? And the answer to me was a life where I never felt truly alone with my emotions, where I would have had someone to talk to at any time I wanted, anywhere, with no filters. Someone who would always see the good in me, no matter what I did or said. Someone who would treat me like they would their own sibling. Someone like Sibley. While failing was hard, it turned out that giving up a true mission was just impossible. And so I embarked on the mission to start Sibley. Sibley is a mental health coach in your pocket 24/7. Anyone could get connected to a group of mental health coaches who would serve as the one voice behind Sibley that's available to you 24/7 when you need it. We believe that anxiety doesn't schedule an appointment, so you should get help right in the moment when you need it. And I could talk about, just the amazing technology and science behind it, but in reality, it's all about the people. I viewed it as my job to, find the right people for the mission. I knew, about just how to build consumer products, but I didn't know how to build a mental health company, and what's the science behind the mental health. And so Omar and I, working in the hookah, started to, think about who we could find as a third co-founder to join our mission. And luckily, we found the amazing Dr. Paula Wellborn. She's 20 years. She's a psychologist who has 20 years experience in building and evaluating mental health treatments programs, where she led one of the largest training programs in the U.S. In empirically based treatment. And so the way I found her, actually, I tried to gather all the therapists here in the U.S., which they have really horrible websites, and gathered them all in one sheet and started to call them one by one. And I was one of the calls I had. I was in a parking lot in Saudi, and I told the guy, I'm like, I'm in Saudi Arabia, and I'm trying to start this company. And he was like taken aback. But this guy, Dr. John McCullough, he actually introduced me to Paula, and I met Paula, and I told her about the ideas I had, that there should be a human in our pocket when we need it. Why isn't there? Why isn't there someone that when I need someone to talk to, I could talk to them in real time? And for her, it ticked the science boxes, that it actually true to say by science that compassion is one of the leading elements of change. That if someone is to change, they need to feel love, they need to feel compassion, and that can only be delivered through a human. No matter what we try to do with technology, I think compassion is a form of intelligence that we are yet to understand, and science is yet to figure out the depth of. And so today, we, after Paula joined, we, in 1 month, we actually launched, so it was a lot in a hurry. Oh, sorry. Okay, I'll be quick. And so today we've served thousands of users, exchanging over 2 million messages with Sibley already. We're seeing a lot of great success due to the culture and the family people we've built. And it's exciting to see the things that are happening, in Saudi, and to bring our values and culture to wherever we go in this inflection point in history. So thank you guys, and good luck with all your venues.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. We're going to take a short break in just a moment, but we have one more speaker who is going to share his story with us. Before I introduce him, could you just let me know if you speak more than one language in the audience? Could you just put your hand up? More than one language. What about 2 languages? Do you speak more than... Oh, that makes it 3. Do you So who speaks 3 languages? So we've got bilinguals and trilinguals, and we have what is it called? Quadrilingual? We have quadrilinguals in here? Yes, actually 1. Well, this next speaker is going to change your life. It's going to make your thoughts much more interesting, particularly when you think about how you can help someone like a refugee that you have no idea how your skills could possibly help them. I'd like to introduce to you someone that's just been backed by Y Combinator with this wonderful idea, who's done transformative work on refugees, Abdulaziz Al-Ghunaim, the co-founder of Tarjimli, who's going to talk about micro-volunteering at a macro scale.
$23 million refugees are struggling with language barriers every single day. That means they're unable to talk to doctors, lawyers, and aid workers. My name is Abdulaziz Al-Ghunaim, and I'd like to share with you how I'm solving this problem with Tarjimli. My team and I spent several weeks in Greek refugee camps, where we met Samira. Samira is a Syrian refugee and a single mother. I want to try and take you through the experience of being in the camp. Samira lives in a camp that operates at a 400% overcapacity. People are living in very tough conditions. Overcrowded, makeshift tents, poor hygiene, and on top of all that, very high tensions, because refugees are from 20 different nations and speak more than 15 languages. One night, Samira wakes up to her little daughter crying with a high fever. She picks her up and runs to the medical tent, where there's a Dutch medic working the overnight shift. Samira does not speak English, and for sure not Dutch. It's 3 a.m., and the medic is struggling to get very simple questions answered. When did the fever start? Is she eating? Any pre-existing conditions that he should know about? See, this language barrier is preventing the medic from diagnosing Samira's little girl. After 40 minutes of trying, he gives them a generic fever medication and asks them to come back tomorrow with a translator. See, I've worked with refugees before, but I never realized that language is a wall they hit in every single direction. كأننا نمشي عميان, Samira told me. It's like we're walking blind. Samira is not alone. There are millions of refugees that struggle with this language barrier every single day. Now, even if they do find a local translator, if you're a woman suffering from sexual abuse or harassment, you're not comfortable sharing that with a local translator, fearing any community repercussions. Not having a translator can make the difference between getting treated or falling ill, between getting asylum or being stuck in the camp, between getting the psychological help you need or falling victim to suicide. And that's why I started Tarjimli. Tarjimli works on eliminating this language barrier for refugees. There are 2 very unique insights that makes this possible today. First, unlike any other time in history, millions of refugees are connected to the internet. In fact, more than 80% of them have internet action. Second, although 23 million refugees is a large number to grasp, the global community of bilinguals is far, far greater. There are more than 3 billion bilinguals that can serve as volunteer translators for these refugees. Terjumli enables any bilingual to volunteer their time and serve as a volunteer translator for a refugee right from their phone. The way it works, the refugee or even the aid worker asks for the language they need translation for, and in turn, we message the best group of translators asking if they're free to help. Within just 60 seconds, they're connected to a real human translator to help them. They can send text, images, documents. They can even get on a call or a video call, all while protecting the real identities of both refugees and aid worker. Sorry, both refugees and the translators. Now, you might be wondering if the volunteers are reliable enough. Can they be fast and responsive? We overcome that by taking advantage of cutting-edge machine learning techniques to predict the availability of translators. So we connect the refugee to exactly the right person. When you wrap complex technology with easy-to-use experience, even typically unreliable systems can work much better than you expect. In fact, just last night, a volunteer translator in Saudi Arabia who works in sales helped a man in Greece get his son admitted to an emergency ward in a local hospital. This works. These are not isolated stories. We've been building this technology for over a year. In the past 3 months, we grew our translations by 20 times. Today, we do more than 2,000 translations for refugees all over the world. We're on track to deliver more than 100,000 translations to more than 20,000 refugees by the end of the year. Although we started this for refugees, today there are more than 65 NGOs that trust Terjumli to communicate with their refugees. This is because Terjumli enables them to serve 3 times as many refugees. Before Terjumli, they had no other option. They tried Google Translate. Google Translate is great for simple text. It doesn't work for conversations. And add dialects on top of that, it's completely unusable. Now, the most impressive part of this story, what I thought was the most impressive learning for me is actually on the volunteer side, on these translators. Today we have thousands of translators helping across an array of topics. But there's not a single week that goes by without us receiving a thank you note from a volunteer. I want to pause here for a second, because this is mind-boggling to me. We are supposed to be thanking them for giving their time. But it turns out we've created something that they've been craving. People have been consuming devastating news for years, and there is nothing they could do about it. People like me feel helpless, like there's nothing we can actually do. It's unclear how my $100 donation actually helps a refugee, especially if it's tomorrow in the news, the situation is even worse. Terjumli breaks this cycle. It allows you to directly impact the life of someone in need. Receive genuine fulfillment for your work, and feel needed and helpful in the world. And that's actually very, very powerful. How do we know that? We were able to achieve a 60% weekly translator engagement on our platform. For context, an average mobile application has a 20% engagement. Instagram, one of the world's most engaging applications, has a 60% engagement. We managed to make volunteering as addictive as Instagram. And every session is directly improving the life of someone in need. Now, this is really big because it goes far beyond translation. What about mental health services, which 90% of refugees need but will never receive? What about career mentorship to help them rebuild their lives? What about help in natural disaster relief. At Terjumli, we're working to unlock the hidden power that millions of people did not know they had. No one thought that knowing a language could save someone's life. I believe we can unlock this power. We're an experienced team of engineers from MIT. Previously, we've worked at some of the leading tech companies in the area. We've worked at Apple, Facebook, and Palantir. At Palantir, I used to build software to tackle some of the world's most complex data problems, detecting financial fraud, optimizing oil production, and improving the process of building airplanes. 3 months ago, Terjumli was backed by Y Combinator, one of the leading tech startup accelerators in the world. They are supporting us to scale this software to the millions that need it. I truly believe that Silicon Valley can do a lot more to help the world's most vulnerable populations. After all, it's the hub for the world's most experienced technologists. So why aren't we ambitious enough to take on the world's biggest human challenges and not just our communities? My team believes in that. They're dedicating their software skills to improve the efficiency of every humanitarian service. Translation is just the start. I invite each one of you to join us as a translator or a partner. Together, we can build the digital bridge to mobilize human skills. In other words, micro-volunteering at a macro scale. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your idea, for bringing it to all of us and sharing it. I actually signed up my services as well. I offered my second language, which is Kiswahili. I'm from Kenya, so I hope that many of you do the same as well. Let's take a short break and have a cup of coffee. And while we're leaving the room, I'd love to share this video of some highlights from the Misk Global Forum.
To make the world a better place for everyone.
Don't ever let somebody else tell you what you can't do. But this is the very first time that I've ever been invited to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
This is a very important topic. Getting youth to show us the future, to help them to feel empowered. That's critical.
Is we're really trying to identify where these gaps are and trying to give the opportunity for the young people to learn or get training or get some form of education on it.
Je veux adresser mon plein soutien et celui de la France au prince héritier pour cette initiative de créer en Arabie Saoudite le Misk Global Forum. Vous relevez le défi d'organiser ici le Davos des jeunes et c'est une formidable source de confiance en l'avenir que vous nous offrez ainsi.
But what if we have a world where every student can learn at their own pace? Every student can master concepts before moving on. And what if it was a world where all of that was freely accessible if you just had access to a low-cost smartphone or some type of a device?
I'm excited about this initiative because I love challenging young people to solve very tough problems and to pursue their dreams.
And youth is a beautiful thing. Be young, enjoy yourself, but know this. While you are off being young and enjoying yourself, the people that you are ultimately going to be competing with, they are someplace grinding. They're studying, they're practicing, they're researching, they're rehearsing, they're networking, and that's going to make the difference between who signs the front of the check and who signs the back of the check.
when you open things up for the young people, they get very creative and start to dream, and I'm very optimistic about what's possible here.
With Misk, we're all about, developing, empowering, and equipping young people for the knowledge economy. And on a global level, essentially the Misk Global Forum is the global arm of the Misk Foundation.
We have the power to find what we need beyond the old educational paradigm. Schools need to recognize the power of these new possibilities and find ways of using technology to improve the educational experience for all.
Saudi Arabia is opening up its market for innovative young entrepreneurs from all over the globe.
هل نحن جاهزون لتوظيف مكاسب الثورات العلمية والصناعية التي يشهدها العالم؟ كيف سنتكيف مع الثورة الصناعية الرابعة التي تضرب بكثير من الصناعات التقليدية؟
In a knowledge economy, human capital, certain forms of human capital becomes especially important in the interaction with machines, machines that have been infused with new technology.
I'm really excited about what the Misk Foundation is doing and really empowering young people.
What did I do today to make tomorrow possible?
الطاقة الحقيقية والقوة الحقيقية لتحقيق هذه الرؤية، وهي أهم ميزة بالنسبة لدى السعودية هي الطاقة الشبابية اللي فيها، وميزة جيدة أنهم شباب واعي قوي لديه طموح رائع مثقف متعلم بشكل جيد مبدع لديه قيم عالية. باقي فقط نضع الرؤية ونعمل عليها. الشباب بلا شك هم أهم روافد هذه الرؤية وتحقيقها.
Welcome back, everyone. If I may ask you at the back of the room to please be seated. We'd like to resume our excellent speakers that are sharing their wonderful experiences. So I would appreciate that. You've heard of the expression, the carrot or the big stick, right? Well, one of our speakers has actually reinvented one of those things. And it's not the carrot, it's actually the big stick. But he's not using the big stick in the way that you think, in the context of that expression, one might use it. He has reinvented a stick that changes the lives of seniors. He's the creator of Goom, which helps seniors sit, stand, and walk independently. It's an amazing reinvention. So please welcome Ahmed Al-Ghazi, the CEO of Can Mobilities.
So, the stick is one of the first product humans have created since the caveman. And after thousands of years, no one have done anything to it. But it's not the only product. Thousands of products around us that we see every day, we just take for granted. Everything from traffic lights to doorknobs, so many things we just use. We haven't thought why it was made this way. And growing up, I grew up in a house that has this product, the landline telephone. It was revolutionary back then. You can call someone else who has it, and it takes almost like 2 minutes just to dial the number. Until someone else created a revolutionary device, and it's called Abu Kashaf. And then it was great. It was personal. You can call, you can take it outside, inside. You can call your friends. But the problem is, it was a dumb product. Until someone else, someone outsider from this industry, the telco industry, came. His name is Steve Jobs. And he thought, this is a dumb product. What about creating a touchscreen phone where you can access apps and have a browser and so on? Everyone laughed at him. They thought it's a gimmick, it's a gaming device that no one will adapt. And I'm sure he proved us wrong. Another device is the thermostat. It used to be a simple knob with temperature, and by rotating it, you can increase the temperature or decrease it. And then someone came and said, and after the 1970s energy crisis in the US, someone said we need to save energy. So how to do that? They created this device that you can have programs to enable the user to save energy. However, it's extremely difficult to use. I'm a tech savvy, and I'm facing a lot of difficulties just using it. And someone else also from a different industry who was working at Apple, reinventing and creating the iPod, his name is Tony Fadell, came and created the Nest Conscious Thermostat. And what it does, it learns from how users interact with it to keep you happy and the temperature the same as what you wanted, and also it saves energy. And there is thousands and thousands of examples of products we interact with every single day, but we take it for granted. And going back to the stick, since the caveman thousands of years ago, the stick has been the same. And no one have done anything to it. And it grabbed my attention after a personal story. My grandmother fell. We were extremely worried about her breaking her hip. We took her to a doctor. And the doctor told her, "You're fine, but you need to start using a cane." And he gave her a cane like this. So she resisted. She didn't want to feel old. There is a stigma attached to like the cane and, and using it. So she went back home, and we were extremely worried about her living independently and safely at her own place. And my family was nervous about that. And after seeing her using not only the cane, other devices like the walker and wheelchair and so on, I made it my mission to bring these devices to the 21st century and help seniors to be safer and family members to have a peace of mind. So in order to do that, I thought how I should start. And all of you know, most of the disruptive technologies comes from this area, Silicon Valley. So I came here and I started working on trying to achieve my dreams. So I remember I attended one of the talks of the guru of human-centric design. His name is Dan Norman. He was giving a talk at Stanford. I was doing a small program there. And I talked to him after his presentation and talk. And he gave me this book, The Design of Everyday Things. And he told me I have a whole chapter about the stigma of using mobility aid devices. And he wrote me this note. Here's your challenge. Make page 244 to 246 obsolete. Make medical assistive devices that everyone will want, even if you don't need them, done. And that was extremely inspiring to me, especially at the early days. From someone like him to give me his book and write that was extremely inspiring. So I started working on the company, and I founded CAM Mobilities in 2014. And with the help of a great team from Stanford and people who, like advisors and people who work at Apple and Google, we worked really hard with a lot of ups and downs, just trying to make this happen. And it's happening. And I would love to take this opportunity to give you a sneak peek of our first product, the world's smartest cane. The world's smartest cane will help millions of seniors to be safer and millions of family members to have peace of mind. And I would love to leave you with this quote by Steve Jobs. Once you discover one simple fact, that is everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you, and you can change it, you can influence it, and you can build your own things that other people can use. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ahmed, for making us look at the stick in a whole new way that could help so many people in the world, and those of whom which we care very much for. Our next speaker will speak about innovative solutions to development. He spent a lot of time looking at sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. I'd like you to give a warm welcome to Jonathan Kirchner, the principal for Omidyar Network. He'll be speaking about investing in off-grid energy solutions for the next 2 billion.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. And I wanted to spend a few minutes, and I've been told, take it down from 10 to 8, so we'll see if we can beat that and get us a few minutes back. I wanted to spend a few minutes talking with you about what I see as the next energy revolution. And this is really the future of energy and where we see the world going and the potential for the next 2 billion people. So let me start with this. This is a picture you may be familiar with. This is a picture of the world from the sky at night. Now, take a look at this and you see certain regions are quite light, densely populated, wealthy countries, lit up at night. A lot of the world, however, large land masses are incredibly dark. You see a lot of South America, many of those places are less densely populated. Sub-Saharan Africa, take a look at Sub-Saharan Africa relative to the rest of the world, incredibly dark in the evening. India and South Asia look lighter, but also incredibly dense population. And so many of those small villages and towns experience limited electricity. Here's a little data. I would be remiss if I didn't share a few data slides for you to take away, but this gives you a sense of electrical outages in a typical month, the quality of connections of people. So you and I are used to having electricity whenever we need, flipping the switch on, not even thinking about it. For many people in the world, so there are about 7.6 billion people on Earth. For 2 billion of them, this is a reality that they face. They have intermittent power, only have access a few hours a day, and have to adjust and have to, figure out a way in which they can make their lives work with limited access. So where are these people and what do they look like? First, let me give you a little bit more data on this population. So as I said, about 2 billion people, and that's split between people who are connected to the grid but have really poor quality access. So these are rolling brownouts, blackouts, continuously having the power go in and out and maybe only have access a few hours a day. But another half of them, over 200 million households or close to 200 million, have no access at all. And many of those are concentrated in sub-Saharan Africa and in South Asia. So primarily in India and Pakistan and Bangladesh, people spend their lives with no access at all. However, this is changing. So as you look at some scatter across the world, this is energy usage per capita. Look at sub-Saharan Africa. I'm using this as an example to see how the global energy infrastructure is shifting over time. Currently, the lowest aggregate usage, lower than Brazil on a country basis, and significantly lower on a per capita basis. But as we project out, both with population growth and increased connections, they will be larger than all of Latin America combined as a continent. Twice the size of that by 2040. So this is a story of shifting demographics and shifting energy demands. This is from The Economist, and you can count on The Economist to frame this as a problem, but I want to touch on a few points here which I think are really interesting. So first, the darker the red, the less access the population has. And so you can see this giant swath going through the middle of sub-Saharan Africa where people, less than 25% of the population has access reliably to electricity. And much of these different shades of red are less than 50% of people having access. With that said, if you can read from there these little pie charts, the penetration of mobile phones has actually increased dramatically. So more than half of people have access, and in some countries the mobile phone penetration is actually over 1 per person, so over 100% penetration. How did that happen? Part of what has happened is in our traditional infrastructure, many of you may have grown up with a landline, as we just discussed in the last presentation. But how many have a landline now? I know that I gave mine up years ago, and I've just adjusted to the idea that I have a cell phone. Well, in many parts of sub-Saharan Africa, that wasn't even a step that people went through. They leapfrogged the existing infrastructure and went straight to a mobile phone. And in many ways, as you just heard, and as you know, it's much more convenient. It's a much better tool. You can carry it with you. You can text. This is an easy thing. It is cheap and now becoming more and more prevalent. So the vision is that much like what happened in the past decade with the leapfrogging of existing technology with mobile phones, there's the potential to leapfrog the traditional energy infrastructure with a distributed energy grid. And it will go beyond the traditional grid and go off-grid. So what's enabling that? Well, one of the key factors is the cost of solar is decreased dramatically. So that's the orange side here. This is the cost of solar panels has come down tremendously over the past 40 years, such that in most of these installations, it is a small portion of the total cost. And as you can see, in response, the market has grown tremendously. So in blue, this is the number of installations throughout the world that has gone up that dramatically. So let me give you a sense of a quick landscape of this, and then I want to give you some examples of what this looks like in the developing world. So as you can see, there's a spectrum here. So in blue is the stuff that's off-grid, and in gray on the right is the stuff that's on the grid. So I'm going to talk mainly about the side that's in blue. And this spans everything from very small-scale lanterns to fully blown infrastructure that looks and feels to the user as if they were connected to the grid, but it isn't. And there's a lot of gradations in between. So the first example, this is a company, and I guess we've been talking a lot about Stanford today, so this came out of the Stanford D School, the design school. It's called D-Light. So they have served over 80 million people around the world. And what they have is a very small-scale solar lantern. Their newest product is less than $5. So that makes it accessible to even people living on $1 a day. They can save up to afford to buy one of these. And for you or for me, this might feel like a fun gimmick or something you'd take camping. For a lot of people, this is a total game changer. Prior to this, when the lights went out, they would use a kerosene lamp or the flashlight, and those solutions produce gas. They run the risk of fire. This is a clean and renewable and affordable solution. So kids can read at night. They provide greater safety. Here's another example of a village in Peru that I visited a few years ago. Now, these people would not only use this to talk at night, but the women in the community were weaving and creating another form of income. They were also going out and checking on their livestock at night. So this provided them not only a means to income, but also a source of security. So these are the basic scale ones. What's next? A company called Off Grid Electric, also from the Bay Area. Think of this as the Solar City of Sub-Saharan Africa. And in fact, Solar City has invested in this company because they too see the future potential of this energy revolution. So what they do is they have a small system. It's about $150, $200. Users pay less than $10 a month, making it accessible to some of even the poorest people. And they have half a dozen lights in their home. They have a little radio, and very importantly, and often this is the primary driver, they have the ability to charge their cell phones. So this has opened up the user experience that is much like people in the developed world have, and yet it is incredibly affordable and now becoming much more widely accessible. And what happens when people get access to electricity? Well, they want more. And so the next stage we're seeing is in mini-grids. So think of a small community level. This is a village in an emerging market where they create a central installation and then connect a bunch of homes. So those homes then have the experience of being connected to the grid effectively. But in addition to that, it enables them to have productive assets. So people in the community are starting up shops where they sell cold drinks. They're processing grains. They're pumping water. This is enabling a whole new form of income generation. So taking these pieces together, we can see that the energy ecosystem is shifting dramatically. It is no longer the need to have the centralized grid to serve those next 2 billion people. But instead, this decentralized vision of the future can enable the empowerment of the next 2 billion, and I hope that you join that journey. Thank you.
تفاعل كبير من الساعات الأولى اللي بدأ فيها الإيفنت، حضور كبير جدا مع إنه في فلوس في عاصفة ثلجية في الخارج.
الفعالية هذه توفر لي مجال إني أشارك في الأمور اللي تعلمتها، الأمور اللي فعلا أحس إني أبغى الناس تسمع عنها وتعرف عنها أكثر.
مسك خلال السنتين بس الأخيرة اللي فاتت استطاعت أنها تجعل منتدياتها مهمة جدا، مهمة لأنها تجمع الناس، تبين للناس وش هي السعودية.
أنا حتكلم اليوم عن البيس والتولرنس اللي هو التعايش والسلام. كيف ممكن نحقق هذا الشيء؟ إيش مشاكلنا اللي احنا قاعدين نعانيها الآن؟
المختلف الآن هنا اليوم أنه المنتدى سعودي برعاية سعودية وطنية، وهو للعالم أنهم يشوفون وش عندنا هي السعودية.
Imagine inserting microwires into the brain. And imagine if that could help treat someone suffering from Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. The first Saudi to win the Gates Cambridge Scholarship is researching this space. His name is Abdul Malik Obeid. He's a graduate of Stanford University, and he's going to be speaking about pro-humanitate, finding your passion.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you to the Misk Foundation for giving me this opportunity to speak with you all today. I wanted to start my talk with a few Latin words. It's a little unusual, I know, but these words have stuck with me since my undergraduate years, and I think they summarize what I do and why I do it. Pro humanitate. That means for humanity. I truly believe it's not about me, it's not about any individual, it's about us and the greater meaning of what it means to be human. Today, I want to remind us all of the importance of working on things for the wider society, whether it's in business, art, or science, whether it's on a research project like the one I will be telling you about today, or whether it's on the plans for Neom, a new city to create a new way of living. We need to place our goals on things that are greater than ourselves. This is what creates innovation, drives passion, and advances societies. For me, this isn't doing scientific research, the universal language to solving problems. One thing that I'm focusing on in my doctoral studies at the Stanford University School of Engineering is neurodegenerative diseases. But before we get to the research results, I want to give you a little bit of background information. In the last few decades, we as a society have become increasingly comfortable with medical devices called prosthetics implanted in various parts of our bodies. Whether it's prosthetic hands and legs for those who've suffered amputation, or retinal prosthetics for the blind, these things are becoming more and more acceptable, and they're becoming more and more frequent. But one thing that I wanted to focus on today is how we're creating the ultimate prosthetic, how we're getting closer and closer to connecting our brains to computers. Why pursue such a crazy idea? Well, the brain and nervous system are a complex part of our anatomy that can also suffer from disease and injury. Examples of neurodegenerative diseases are like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, chronic pain, and paralysis. All of these diseases have one thing in common. They all involve the faulty operation of the nervous system. Our nervous system controls the entire body. So anytime something goes wrong with our nervous system, any other body system can also suffer pain and disorder. The number of people suffering from neurodegenerative diseases is increasing, and it's expected to be the leading cause of death around the world. The research I'm working on will help those who suffer from these life-threatening and debilitating conditions. When someone loses one of their 5 senses, or loses control of one of their limbs, they fundamentally lost a part of their connection to the world. But what if these patients could connect their brains to a computer? We know that modern technology can already perform functions that our body used to be able to do that modern medicine is unable to address. For example, high-definition cameras have become so ubiquitous, they're in the pockets of every member of this audience in the form of a smartphone. Robotic arms have become so advanced, they can perform surgery faster and better than even the most talented surgeons. So this begs the question, can we interface our brains with these technologies in order to overcome functions lost? For example, let's look at deep brain stimulation treatment for Parkinson's disease. Parkinson's disease already affects over 1.5 million patients in the United States alone, and there are 60,000 additional people diagnosed every year. Parkinson's causes profound tremors that makes patients have difficulty controlling their motor functions. The root cause of this disease? Faulty operation of the nervous system. One of the few treatments for Parkinson's disease is something called deep brain stimulation. And this is where they implant a small cardiac-like pacemaker unit in the heart that sends electrical signals through a wire implanted deep into the brain. Let me show you what this treatment looks like. This is a man with Parkinson's disease, and he's had this deep brain stimulator implanted. To the left, you can see when he has this deep brain stimulator off, he has trouble controlling his hands, and he has trouble walking. As soon as he turns it on, he regains much of his motor functionality. The small electrical current disrupts abnormal neural activity that causes the tremor to temporarily subside. Despite its remarkable benefits, deep brain stimulation is known to cause severe side effects, such as depression, suicidal tendencies, anxiety, and interestingly enough, completely changing people's personalities. What's the problem here? Well, communication in our brain occurs thanks to neurons. Neurons are very small cells that specialize in transmitting nerve impulses. Think of them as wires in our brain. The issue is, the artificial wires we're using to interface with neurons are 1,000 times larger. Think of plugging in a 100-foot wide cable into a power outlet. They're just not compatible. In addition, current technologies often use only a few electrodes, when there are billions of neurons in the brain. To give you an idea of the complexity, there are more connections between neurons in the brain than there are stars in the galaxy. So what if we could start to pick up and write in brain signals, not just from a few points, but from millions of points? Then we could start to do things like drive a prosthetic arm, such that somebody could just think about moving their arm in a certain direction and it would go that way. We could start to treat diseases like Parkinson's with higher accuracy, reducing the debilitating side effects that current treatments often cause now. So how can we connect our brains to a million different points? Well, you might be thinking, our smartphones can already pack 100 million transistors into a square millimeter. And that's true. So why aren't we using these millions of transistors to connect with neurons and to treat diseases like Parkinson's? The issue is that most electronics are built to be flat, and they're made of extremely stiff materials that make it difficult to insert them directly into the brain without causing severe damage and inflammatory response. So what's our solution? Well, we need to create a neural interface that can translate between the circuits of the brain, the neural circuits, and high-speed digital signals. This interface needs to be massively parallel so that we can record from many neurons at a time, and it also needs to be made with materials that are compatible with the brain so that we were not damaging the same structure that we're trying to understand. Here at Stanford, I'm working on this next-generation brain-machine interface, extending the powers of modern electronics to reach deep areas of the brain. To do this, we use microwires 5 to 7 times thinner than a human hair. These wires are so small they cause very little damage to the brain. To the left, you can see a size comparison of one of these wires to a hair. And to the right, this is a unique visualization technique that we employ to look at deep areas of the brain. The red and yellow areas represent blood vessels, and the green points are a specific type of brain cell. Coming in from the right is a hair, is a wire that's the size of a hair. But as it goes in, you can see that it's rupturing the blood vessels, displacing the local tissue, and when it's extracted, you can see the trauma that's left in its track. This is the size of a human hair. Take a look at your hair and think about how small that is, but look at how much damage it's causing. In comparison, when we insert a wire significantly smaller than that, the same microwires that we use, we can see that it's going in deep into the brain while causing minimal damage to the local tissue. To take advantage of this minimally invasive technology, we've come up with methods to produce and bundle up these wires at scale. We take techniques from the textile industry. We start with a continuous spool, a continuous fiber of pure metal. We perform several treatments. We perform several treatments to make these wires compatible to insert into the brain, and we've developed methods to agglomerate these wires and connectorize them to technology that already has millions of pixels. By doing this, we're able to record and stimulate the neural activity from each individual wire simultaneously. This gives us access to the brain at an unprecedented scale, revolutionizing the way that we can treat neurodegenerative diseases and accelerating what we know about the brain. I'm working on this technology at Stanford University, working very closely with Paradromics, a startup that spun out of our lab based on this research, based on this work, that recently secured an $18 million DARPA grant to accelerate the commercialization of this technology to ensure that we can improve the lives of as many people as possible. Here at Stanford, with my academic and industrial collaborators, I hope to revolutionize the scientific understanding of the brain, enabling future treatments and preventative measures for a variety of neurological disorders. Lastly, with exciting new initiatives, advancing human health and investing in cutting-edge research, Saudi Arabia will be at the forefront of furthering the greater good. We face many challenges, and solving them requires huge commitment. Scientists spend all their lives working tremendous hours and face many failures before seeing light at the end of the tunnel. In order to get through them, through the obstacles that stand between us and our goals, our motivations need to be furthering the greater good. With that, I'd like to thank you all, and I wanted to thank the amazing people I've had the opportunity of working with, and two of which were able to come to this talk today, so thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the incredible work that you're doing. Our next speaker is passionate about how technology can make transformational changes in complex ecosystems, as well as Wes Anderson movies. Abdullah Janahi is a graduate of Stanford University, and his topic is The Ones You See Coming.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Abdullah. I'm finishing up my philosophy degree right now at Stanford University in a master's program, and completed my computer science degree last year. I want to start off by thanking the Misk Foundation, the organizers, and also all of you for taking some time out of your day to listen to what I have to say. So I've so creatively titled my presentation, The Ones You See Coming, and hopefully that'll make sense with time. So to give you an outline of my talk, I'm going to start off by giving you a little bit of information about my background, and then I'm going to walk you through my Silicon Valley experience. And finally, I'm going to talk about how I intend to apply that experience in the Middle East. So originally from Bahrain, I'm not sure if you've heard about it, but it's a small island next to Saudi Arabia. And I've been lucky to interact with lots of Saudis in my life at the cinema and on the streets of Bahrain. Although I was born in Bahrain, I actually grew up in Geneva in Switzerland and attended an international school over there before coming to California. And as you can tell, I've had this very international experience, which is really ingrained in my DNA. And I approach every single situation I see, whether it's in my personal or professional life, with this global outlook. When I first came to Stanford, I was really thrust into this technology and entrepreneurial ecosystem. I majored in computer science, and I got involved in multiple student groups. One of the things I really got involved with was Sensa Labs, which is a social enterprise incubator program on campus, which I actually led. And we incubated 6 social enterprises and provided them with resources from all around Silicon Valley. Venture capitalists, business professors, entrepreneurs. And that was really the first taste I got of entrepreneurship and helping individuals that were building companies. And once I caught the bug, I couldn't stop. I pursued my international interest in technology and building technology ventures by working in venture capital in Lebanon, in Los Angeles, and actually working in an operational role under the VP of product at an enterprise AI company right here in the Valley. But the most impactful thing out of all of this for me at Stanford was the ability that I had to meet with so many interesting individuals just coming in to my freshman year. These people were starting companies when they were 12 years old. They were doing AI research at the age of 16. They were investing in Bitcoin at a time we all wish we knew what that even meant. And so I felt very lucky to be with these individuals and to have late night conversations with them where they were talking about creating revolutionary companies. They truly wanted to change the world. And that galvanized my personal desire to leverage technology to change the world as well. So I saw these people starting all these great companies, and I started thinking about it. And I looked into it a bit more deeply, and I found out that Stanford actually produced the most billion-dollar founders of any university in the United States. They actually produced around 50 of them. All these companies have come out of Stanford. I'm sure you know some of them. Maybe some of you are using them right now. And if you look at the numbers, on average, once every 4 years, there's $1 billion company that comes out of Stanford. So I thought about this opportunity and my passion of helping founders and thought, how can I bring this all together? So my sophomore year, I actually decided to do something about it. I got together with some of my best friends who have all gone on to do very successful things, and we decided to formalize this into a fund where we were backing Stanford entrepreneurs and connecting them with the resources of an international investor network that we had brought together that was very interested in obtaining access to Silicon Valley. We had access to these companies before large venture capital firms because these people were our friends, our roommates, our classmates. And in doing so, we invested in over 30 companies, and they've gone on to raise over $200 million in follow-on funding. All these founders have been very impactful in my life and have gone on to do great things, but I wanted to focus on 2 companies that I think will be interesting for the people in the crowd tonight. One of them is called Nova Credit, and they're revolutionizing cross-border credit access. So before, if you were, say, a Chinese student in the US and wanted to try and get a loan here, it was a very difficult process. But with Nova, you can easily access your credit history from back home and come to the US and just easily get a loan. Human, on the other hand, is a company also started by Stanford entrepreneurs who are actually creating the quintessential human enhancement company. They're backed by the best venture capitalists in Silicon Valley and create products that help boost the physical and mental performance of warfighters and athletes. You should check them out when you have the time. Most of all, although I provided value to these founders through my international network, the individuals I met in the Valley, and my hustle, what really was important to me and really provided me with value was the fact that I actually learned a lot from these founders. I learned how to operationally run a company. I learned how to scale a company. I learned how to hire great talent. And what I've decided is moving forward, I'm going to apply everything I've learned to building something in the Middle East. So why is this such a great time? Why are we so lucky? All of us here are at the heart of Silicon Valley, and I'm assuming many of us are passionate about technology. And for us to also be here, we're passionate about the GCC, the MENA region. And we're lucky because we live in a beautiful time where both of those passions can come together at an intersection and create this beautiful opportunity to create a tech ecosystem in the Middle East. Governments in Saudi Arabia and Bahrain and other regions, other countries in the Gulf have created a multitude of initiatives to help technology companies in the region thrive and to help entrepreneurship thrive. How am I going to go about this? I'm thinking of a very Silicon Valley concept, which is technology platforms and creating technology platforms. Technology platform companies enable other companies to easily develop technology and also enable an entire ecosystem of talent to come together, developers, stakeholders, investors, and to build applications on top of these technology platforms. You can think of Facebook as a platform for identity, Stripe a platform for payments, Zenefit's a platform for businesses, but I think the quintessential example is WeChat, which is a Chinese company that actually started off doing messaging, then got into payments, and then had third-party developers come on top of the platform and create delivery application and personal finance applications as well. My personal interest for the Middle East, and an area that I think demands work, is the small and medium-sized enterprises. And governments in the Middle region have also noticed that. Small and medium-sized enterprises consist of 80 to 90% of all the businesses in the region, and they currently they lack access to funding because there's not enough data available to them. So what if you could create an open ecosystem on top of these small and medium-sized enterprises by offering them applications and opening up their financial data? You could then create this beautiful ecosystem of companies that can provide them with financial products, insurance products, and even connect them with end consumers and create better visibility. So I've talked about a lot of opportunities today, things the governments are doing, opportunities in technology, but most of all, I think the greatest opportunity is all of you sitting right in front of me, the youth. You are the ones we see coming, and let's work together to change the world. Thank you.
I will be speaking today about how women are a source of economic advantage. I'm going to show and demonstrate my research that I've conducted at my school.
اتاحت الفرصة إن أحد يطلع على مسرح في محفل زي كذا، يعني بالعكس جدا حلوة وكويسة، ومنها تعزز العلاقة والشراكة، إنه في شباب كانوا يتكلموا عن تكنولوجيا وأشياء لنا علاقة فيها، فممكن يصير في تعاون لاحقا أو ما بعد، فبالعكس هي فرصة جدا ممتازة.
صراحة كانت تجربة رائعة، وكنت جدا سعيدة إني أتكلم مع اليوم عن بحثي وعن تشجيع البحوث في السعودية. والجمهور كان رائع والحضور كان رائع، يعني طاقة إيجابية في المكان، وتحس كان شعور جدا جميل إنك تشوف طلبة آخرين مبتعثين في أمريكا أو جايين من أماكن ثانية، والإنجازات اللي قاعدين يسوونها.
الشغل اللي سوته مسك جبار جدا، هذا يسمى الببليك بوليسي، خدم المملكة العربية السعودية وخدمنا احنا كسعوديين، فعلا عكسنا صورة جميلة جدا عن المملكة.
We have a couple more speakers left this evening, so please be patient, and I promise you they are worth it. They have so many wonderful things to share with us. Our next speaker is going to talk about how to improve performances of established businesses. In fact, he built the Zillow of Saudi Arabia. Khalid Al-Ali is a graduate of the University of California at Berkeley, and his topic is question the status quo.
Thanks, Dan. Hey guys, thanks for sticking around so late today. I know it's been a very long day. I'm sure everyone could use some shawarma right now. Thanks a lot to Misk for giving me the opportunity to speak. Really, really happy to be here. So let's jump to it. Let's question the status quo. And to do that, let's start with the end in mind. These are the top 5 regrets of people right before they die. Now, a few weeks ago, I had an assignment for one of my MBA classes called The Art of Coaching Conversations, where we were tasked with looking at this list and speaking to one that really clicked with us. And for me, it was the first one. I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. And I'm going to show you how this one is applied throughout my career. So this one really stayed true to me and really resonated powerful with me because it's one that I've avoided entirely. I've always taken risks throughout my life. I've always tried to find ways to live a life that's authentic to myself. So when I first came out of undergrad, I joined McKinsey & Company in their Dubai office. got to work on all sorts of industries. One day I was in a construction site wearing a hard hat. Another day I was in the boardroom with TVTC in Saudi Arabia thinking about how we can improve education in the country. Had a blast doing that. And all my colleagues, after they finished their 3 years at McKinsey, which was the standard, they went on to business school directly, or they went and joined an established business. I thought that was way too boring, and I wanted to change the world, and so I joined Rocket Internet. At the time, I had no idea what my role would be, who I would report to, what business I would work on, what geography I would be in. But I knew that it sounded really cool, and it got me really pumped. Rocket Internet, based out of Germany, builds internet businesses around the world. And so they brought me in to help set up an online real estate portal for them in Saudi Arabia. I had an incredible time doing that, worked on that for a year, and I was thrown into this role where I literally knew no idea of what I was doing. So our job was to convince real estate agencies to list their properties onto our platform, which involved selling to small and medium-sized real estate agencies across Saudi Arabia. Personally, I hadn't sold much before in my life, but I was tasked with hiring a sales team, figuring out what price we should charge, figuring out how to build our brand, figuring out how to market ourselves. And all of those challenges allowed me to grow individually. It also allowed me to have a very personal impact. And that's really what drove me throughout all aspects of my career. It's the desire to have a very personal impact, be able to look back and say, oh yeah, I did that. That happened because of me. And so after a year, I was pretty comfortable. We had captured a good chunk of the market. We had sort of established ourselves as the #1 vertical classifieds real estate portal, but I decided I wanted another challenge. And so I joined Imena Group, where, again, I wasn't really fully sure what I was going to do, but they told me that they wanted me to run their office in Saudi Arabia. So I was like, okay, cool, that sounds good. So I come in, first employee in Saudi, built out the entire team, figured out our functions, our processes, and everything. Had an incredible time, very, very challenging throughout. But eventually I felt like, the business seems pretty stable. What am I going to do next? And so I decided to, rip my life apart, get rid of my beautiful apartment, get rid of my car, and come out here to pursue my MBA at Berkeley to get exposure to technology startups in the Bay Area. And I hope to one day eventually go back to Saudi and contribute again and try to build something from scratch again. And I encourage all of you to try to figure out, what kind of path you want to take, what level of risk you're comfortable with. And this is just one path that you can consider. But today I'm really going to encourage you to pursue entrepreneurship, because I think while it is very challenging, there's so many opportunities in Saudi for entrepreneurs to raise money, to build businesses, and to employ people. And so building a business in Saudi is very difficult. I'm sure living here, you're exposed to a lot of challenges that have to do with building a business in Silicon Valley. Building in Saudi is more difficult, I would argue. Specifically, hiring was one of the biggest challenges that we faced. I literally spent every single day recruiting people, interviewing people, and I think a lot of you in this room who have grown up in Saudi have the advantage of having very strong connections from your schools and from your network, and that's something you can take advantage if you choose to go back. Another big challenge that we faced, we would go into these meetings with big real estate agencies, big real estate developers, and we'd go through the entire pitch, tell them how great we are, tell them how much traffic we have, and they would look at us like everything we had just said was a lie. They refused to believe anything. And so literally you'd have to hammer them down in multiple meetings. And honestly, the solution to this is to go through your personal network, get introductions, partner with existing brands that already exist, because building one in Saudi from scratch is incredibly challenging. Finally, navigating laws in the government was a mission in and of itself. I think we had to register with 6 different government agencies. Figuring that out on your own and doing all that on your own is very difficult. Luckily, more recently, it's become easier. There's an SME authority that sort of tries to help you set up with the different agencies. And there's a lot of support right now from Vision 2030, making it easier for SMEs to set up. And so I think a couple other things you can do is work with accelerators. There are a couple being set up, or find really good mentors who can support you. Despite all these challenges, I think the opportunities are massive, and I think right now is the time to go back and build businesses. E-commerce grew by 30% in the last year, while GDP grew by only 1.7%. So e-commerce is now worth $2.9 billion. FinTech, just a couple of months ago, the Capital Market Authority released a new regulation on how to regulate FinTech companies, which means it's going to be easier, more transparent on how to build a FinTech company. Construction, massive, massive industry. I mean, I was on site, and there's just So much inefficiency that you see on a day-to-day basis on a construction site, and yet it contributes $30 billion to GDP. So imagine if you're able to like improve 1% of that, just how much of a difference you could make and how much opportunity there is. Arabic content, there are millions of Arabs that are looking for high-quality Arabic content. Doesn't exist right now. There is some, but there's just not nearly enough. If you compare it to how many people are searching and how much content is out there, I made a content website over the course of 3 months on the side, and I still get over 400 visitors a day. So if you're able to do it full time, you're going to be, there's a massive opportunity to actually build a business there. Finally, I'd like to finish off with encouraging you to just go out and create your own adventures. So live a life that's true to yourself, not just, in your career and, in the very serious stuff, but also when it comes to fun stuff. So I've visited like 31 countries so far, plan to visit many more before I die. First picture over here, that's in Austin, Texas. I'd heard about this amazing conference in Austin called South by Southwest. Decided I really wanted to go this year. I didn't wait around for any friends to say that they were going to join me. I just booked a flight, booked a hotel, bought my conference ticket, and went. Had an incredible time seeing bands from all over the world, networking with individuals from all around the world. Second photo, this is actually just last week. I was in Colombia, and I had really wanted to visit Colombia for a long time to experience the culture, the food, the people. And rather than sit around for someone to organize the trip, I just organized it myself, booked everything, and then I managed to convince one friend to join me. And so we went out into the mountains, drove ATVs, and had a blast. Last photo, for as long as I can remember, I've really wanted to visit San Diego. I've also really wanted to surf for a very long time. And so last Thanksgiving, I didn't wait around for my friends to organize a trip. I just booked, drove down, went surfing for the weekend, and had an incredible time. So when you leave here today, when you go home, I want you to ask yourself, do you have the courage to live a life that's true to yourself, or are you living a life that other people expect of you?
Thank you so much. We didn't exactly see you surfing. We just saw you holding up the surfboard, so. Okay, last speaker, fantastic topic, something we should all be aware of. She really explores the nexus between human trafficking survivors and technology. She's also been the president of Women of Stanford Law. Please welcome Jessica Hubley, the co-founder and CEO of Annie Cannons, who'll be talking about the natural hackers that no one is recruiting in tech.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for staying to the end. She said, my name is Jessica Hubley, and Annie Cannons is transforming survivors of human trafficking into software professionals to feed the global knowledge economy. Right now, within about a mile of here, there is a human trafficker selling a child for sex, using force, fraud, or coercion. But in as little as 24 months, that young person could be building mobile apps and earning 6 figures a year. And this isn't a hypothetical. Annie Cannons has done this and still is. In fact, there is one such young woman building a mobile app using React Native for Claremont McKenna College as I stand here talking to you. And what's more, that young person outside might actually have a higher than average chance at being a good software developer. So let me explain. You see, we often hear in San Francisco about this pipeline problem, but the problem is not that there aren't talented candidates there among women or minority groups. The problem is that in order to utilize that talent, companies are seeking to hire employees with credentials, just like the ones they already have, for a role they already created in a corporate model they've been using evaluation criteria just like the ones they already have, and simply apply those to a candidate who happens to be a woman or an immigrant or black. But the problem is not that talented individuals don't exist among marginalized groups. It's that all of those mechanisms assume, or rather are designed to evaluate the talent of someone who's had abundant opportunity. You see, most of the reasons that someone ends up being trafficked happened long before they ever met their trafficker. They have to do with discrimination, with poverty, with orphanhood, with violence. and actually truly equalized, unbiased opportunity in both tech hiring and human trafficking could fix the problem. But it's easier said than done. So in order to tell you how it's done, I'm actually going to need your help. I'm going to need you to very consciously dismiss several unconscious misconceptions. First, dismiss this idea that software engineering is just plain hard. Software engineering is much more like learning a foreign language. Some people just can't, it's true. But most people, through immersion and practice, will eventually get the key concepts, and some people will ultimately come to speak like a native. Next, dismiss this concept that talent and opportunity are distributed equally to human beings upon their birth. For example, when all second graders in one Fort Lauderdale classroom were IQ tested, without reference to ability to pay or parental intervention, the distribution of their IQ scores fell equally, regardless of their race. See, human beings are actually born into our world with an equal distribution of talent. It's what society does to them that causes their performance to differ. And next, this is the hardest part. Try to release the misconceptions that you have likely absorbed about human trafficking, which is defined loosely by the UN as the exploitation of a human being through the use of force, fraud, and/or coercion. See, people are not raped or trafficked because they have low IQs or because they did something wrong. They're generally raped or trafficked because of something completely outside of their control, or because some very sophisticated individual or group carefully created a strategy to exploit them. Next, forget this idea of physical restraint. Physical restraints occasionally exist, but restraint is much more often psychological, woven of threats and insults and lies and manipulation. And finally, try to let go of this idea that all human trafficking survivors are the same. Estimates suggest that as many as 48.5 million people are trafficked around the world every single year. And like any other group of 50 million people, there are drastic differences among them, though they often have vulnerability in common. And this means, statistically, actually, that there are about 500,000 people in that group with IQs over 135, and roughly 121,000 geniuses. So let me say this again, geniuses. We are ignoring the innovative potential of over 100,000 geniuses because of the circumstances of their birth or something someone else chose to do to them. All right, now that you've released all of those misconceptions, I'm going to tell you why actually those who have survived human trafficking, and by that I mean stayed alive, gotten away, and stayed away, might actually be likely to be above average software programmers. You see, most are exploited repeatedly and starting as children, and they have no parents or others to care for, provide for, or support them. Consequently, they're forced to fend for themselves. Now, just to give you some examples from among our students of what this means. One girl was locked during the day in the closet of her foster home until she figured out how to pick the lock from the inside. Most of them survive homeless and on the streets for some period of time. And many of them figure out ways to travel long distances with no money. One boy actually figured out how to escape from the dog cage where he spent his infancy and his childhood at 12. And not only fed himself, he taught himself physics and calculus by age 17. You see, these are life hackers. It's often difficult for someone like me, someone who's had people to provide for and protect them, to immediately fathom the cunning that it takes for someone to just stay alive in these circumstances. So let's do a thought experiment. Imagine that you are hungry, you're homeless, you're sleep deprived, you're under constant psychological coercion and the constant threat of physical and sexual abuse. Now, I need you to run an all-cash business with no protection from law enforcement or government, and if you miscalculate, you may die. See, that's the kind of life hacker we're talking about here. Just by staying alive, these individuals have demonstrated an incredibly high capacity for problem solving and grit. And as it happens, problem solving and grit are the two best predictors of success as a software engineer. Now, admittedly, there is a long road between, missing a slide. There's a long road between the street outside and building mobile apps. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what it takes to get there, but I'll tell you the hardest part is not teaching someone to code. So first, we partner with shelters and service providers that are providing for emergency needs and the necessities that literally any human requires to learn. Next, we're taking these individuals through a screening process that's education agnostic and privilege agnostic, but that's identifying their logical aptitude, their problem-solving capacity, and their grit. We take those students and we train them in a trauma-informed, very practical, and very market-driven curriculum to give them the skills that they need, first to learn by doing and then learn by earning income, to be successful in this field. And finally, and this is critical, we actually operate an agency, our impact agency, where we use our privileges as a buffer to help our graduates monetize their skills. So Annie Cannon sold Claremont McKenna on that mobile app. We did all of the contracting and the billing, but our graduate is the one being paid to build it. And there's no doubt that we would have an easier time getting funded as a farm to ship diverse candidates off to tech company interviews. But we don't do that. And that's partly because we think we've happened upon a perfect business here. And it's powered by all of that untapped human talent. You see, we talk about discrimination and harassment in tech workplaces all the time around here right now. And usually the discussion is focused around what's legal or what's bad PR. But what I'm concerned about is that it's inefficient. It's inefficient to ignore talented people because of the mere circumstances of their birth. It's inefficient to ignore huge pools of talent for that reason, and it's inefficient to once you hire them, if you happen to, ignore the value of their perspective or their good ideas. And consequently, what we've developed is a transitional market. So the market for trafficking persons is estimated $150 billion a year. Yes, that's huge. But the market for software engineering services outsourcing is $1.5 trillion a year, 100 times that size. And if you went to business school, they probably told you that's a really good idea to target huge growing markets. But they probably didn't tell you that you have an opportunity to use the power of those markets to transform and deflate the black markets that operate in the abuse of human beings. And that's what we're doing. And that's what we think is perfect. So our developers are just getting started, but they're already excellent. And as a result, our impact agency revenue grows between 50% and 500% quarter over quarter. This means that in about 3 years, with about half of what a traditional software company with no revenue raises for their Series A round, we can power, through that revenue, the ability to train eventually more and more and more survivors, and sustain our own operations internally. So very briefly, there maybe is someone in the audience who's asking, is there something that I can do? And there are two things actually that I'll throw out at you. You can hire our impact agency to do software engineering services that you are perhaps already outsourcing. And you can, of course, make a tax-deductible investment that will help us bridge the gap between talent and opportunity for more survivors. But the outcome of either investment in the perfect business is that the world becomes a better place. So my name is Jessica Hubley. Thank you for staying late to listen to why Annie Cannons is transforming survivors of human trafficking.
Nice job. Thank you so much for the incredible work that you're doing. That brings us to the end of our program. And I just want to say thank you to all the speakers here today who shared their dreams, their efforts, their energy, their aspirations that are so critical to all of us in shaping a better tomorrow for a pretty polarized world. So thank you very much. Good evening. I'd like to leave you with a video of the Misk Festival in Riyadh so you can see some of those highlights. Good night.